I've spent a lot of time studying creativity scientifically, and the first thing that's useful to note is that creativity is not common. I mean, everyone isn't creative. That's wrong. Yeah. Some people are very creative. A minority of people are very creative. And I mean, it's a continuum, but you don't get creativity till you get out to the point where what you're doing is original. And that's very difficult. So it's a minority proposition. And then of those original people, there's only a tiny fraction that can make a successful financial go of it, because it's just, you have to be creative. Plus you have to have some sense for marketing and sales and business, and you have to be reasonably emotionally stable, and et cetera, et cetera. It's very, very difficult. But if you are creative by temperament, well, that's you. To not do that is to not be you. It's like asking an extroverted person not to be around people, or an agreeable person not to engage in intimate relationships, or a conscientious person not to be driven by duty. It's like, that's what you're like. And so, you're stuck with it. It's a double-edged sword, creativity. It's vital, it's entrancing, it's necessary, it's transformative, it's disruptive, but it's a high-risk, high-return game. And the probability of failure is overwhelmingly high. Even if you're an entrepreneur and more practically oriented in your creativity, the probability that you'll make money from your innovation or your invention rather than other people is very, very low.
But you need to find a way. I mean, it's also very difficult if you're a creative person to a lot of creative people don't think in practical terms. They don't think in terms of money. Actually, they're hopeless. A lot of them I know are hopeless in this.
No, they also tend to be casually contemptuous of that, to regard it as practical concerns as selling out. It's like, you should be bloody happy if you have the opportunity to sell out.
So I think that the ideal is to find a way to pursue your vocation, but have one eye on the reality that you will have to earn money somewhere or another.
Yes, I agree.
And I think it's that's why I think I'm lucky insofar as with Titania, I hit on something that had commercial viability, but it was very true to what I desperately wanted to do. And I think that's so rare. I think some of the stuff I've written, some of the plays I've written, for instance, I don't think would have any commercial success whatsoever, but I wrote them because I needed to write them. And some of them didn't even get on. And maybe one day they will, and that would be great. But what if you were
just think what you have to accomplish though, right? You have to have your creative endeavor aligned with market demand at exactly that time.
Right. It's impossible.
It's very, very unlikely.
Actually, that's why I always say don't attempt to anticipate the zeitgeist, because you won't. The best thing an artist can do is do what they believe and hope, because a lot of it is luck.
There's a technical literature on that too. I mean, essentially what you do is continue to produce ideas. And it's a Darwinian competition, essentially. They're like life forms, these ideas. And now and then one will find a niche that it can thrive in. But the best way to maximize your chances that niche will manifest itself is to overproduce. Because I'll give you an example. I answered a bunch of questions on Quora. So that's a website where anybody can ask any questions and anybody can answer. I answered about 50 when I was playing with Quora. And one of them was a list of everything people should know, of things people should know in their life. And I derived my books out of that list.
Yes.
It was disproportionately successful. Most of the answers I generated got virtually no views, but it must be hundreds of thousands now. But even before I wrote the books, it was tens of thousands. But had I not written 50, I wouldn't have got that one. The other 49 failures, so to speak, were the answers weren't necessarily worse. They just didn't hit the zeitgeist like that answer did. And
I think that's a great piece of advice. Overproduction, because it's the same with the Beatles. They look like an overnight success. It's because they've been playing endlessly in those dingy clubs in Europe. Before it happened, you produce as much as you can. They say it takes 10
years to become an overnight success.
That's it. So of most of the things I've written have done nothing and gone nowhere and had no success whatsoever. It's just, but the one thing occasionally when it hits, that's what sustains all the rest of it. And
it's also why creativity continues to be selected. Let's say from a biological perspective, it's like, that's why I said it was a high risk, high return game. Almost everything you do creatively will fail, but now and then you're disproportionately successful. And so that keeps the whole game going.
You didn't have any sense, did you, that when you put the lectures on YouTube that it would explode in this way? I mean, that
not
wasn't...
in this way. This was completely. I'm still shocked constantly by my life. I'm shocked out of sanity by my life. I just can't. This is why I asked you about Titania. You know, you get at the center of a whirlwind like that, and there's something very surreal about it. And I mean, yeah, I keep getting hit by surreal things, and it's very hard to. Like this Red Skull episode was just one of many equally surreal occurrences. But
yes,
no, I had no idea. I knew I was working on something important back when I was in my 20s, when I wrote my first book. And it was out of that all my lectures came. And I spent 15 years working on that book, and I worked on it about 3 hours a day. And so I thought about it all the time. And so I knew there was something to it, not necessarily because they were my ideas, but because of the people who I had read and delved into while I was writing the book. I knew the ideas were significant. And I could see the effect of the ideas when I was lecturing on my students. So I had some sense that there was something vital, that I was involved in something vital. But
sure. But had you uploaded those videos a couple of years before or a couple of years later, you probably would have missed the zeitgeist and nothing would have happened. You know, I mean, it doesn't matter. I always think with any kind of creative endeavor or intellectual endeavor, it doesn't matter how good you are in a sense. It has to be good, and the timing has to be right. And like you say, if you just keep, I think persistence is it. If you just keep doing it, not only does your craft get better, and you are, if it does hit, you're in a position to be able to handle it. There's no doubt.
Look, if you okay, so in scientific literature, the hallmark of impact is citations. And so if your work is cited, it means that someone who's written another scientific article makes reference to something you wrote. And that's all tracked, and it's used for promotions, and it's used to judge scientific merit. It's its own science, citation tracking. A very small number of your published papers accrue most of the citations. So that's the first thing. So what that means is the more papers you publish, the more likely it is that one of them will become highly cited. And my highly cited papers aren't necessarily the ones that I thought would be most impactful. So but the other piece of information from literature on creativity is that the best predictor of quality, and so you could index quality by impact, let's say, or by citations, is quantity. Yeah. It's not a great predictor, but it's the best one. And so, and this is good advice for everyone out there who's a musician or an artist. It's like, produce as much as you can, because you do get better at it, right?
You absolutely do. And so there's that, but there's also, I think the other important thing is to actually be true to yourself in your artistic endeavors, insofar as don't be trying to anticipate the design